From the FOX6 studios, this is Ask Contact 6, and this is the segment where we bring in experts to answer your questions. Today, our topic is household pests and rodents. We chose this issue because we know how stressful it can be when you hear scratching in the attic or you see bugs in your kitchen. I personally had a bat in my chimney once that I did not enjoy. So we know people want their home to be a safe place where they can relax, and having pests and rodents can make that difficult. So to answer your questions today, on a wide range of topics, we have two experts joining us here. First, we have PJ Winkleman from Advanced Wildlife and Pest Control. PJ, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Excited to hear the questions.
We have some good ones today. We also have Jeremy Prochnow of American Animal Control. Jeremy, you stepped up earlier this week and agreed to fill in for another expert who was going to be here. So thank you for coming to offer your insights as well.
You're welcome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. We are going to get to our viewer questions in just a moment. But first, thank you to everyone who sent in a question. We got a record number of submissions. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can today. Also, PJ and Jeremy will do their best to answer your questions based on the information we have. But for more advice on a specific situation, you may want to schedule a visit with a trusted pest control company. All right, let's get going. Once again, reading our questions today is our Contact 6 associate producer, Annette. Annette, what is our first question?
Sure. So we'll start with the issue that we got the most questions about, box elder bugs and stink bugs. We got 8 submissions on this topic from people across southeast Wisconsin. I'll read a few of them to give you an idea of what people are dealing with. The first one comes from Gloria in Glendale. She would like to know, how do you get rid of stink bugs? She says, I had a pest control company. The bugs would disappear for a while and then return. The second question is from Terry in Greenfield. Terry writes, box elder bugs and stink bugs have been invading our house all winter. How do we combat this or prevent this next year? And then Dennis in Mugwanago also has an issue with box elder bugs and stink bugs. And Dennis would like to know, what can I use to repel stink bugs? So in summary, the question is, how do I get rid of stink bugs?
First of all, can we go over, are box elder bugs and stink bugs the same thing?
No,
Okay.
box elder bugs they're actually more associated with the box elder tree. So if you have box elder trees in your yard, you are very likely to have box elders there. And a stink bug came from out east, and that is a bug that hasn't been here for the last 20 years, maybe more so in the last 10 years, but they're not going anywhere. They are a pain in the butt, that's for sure.
Are these a year-round problem, or does it become worse in the spring?
A lot of it would be seasonal. So when we see the bulk of our calls would be in spring and then again in fall. But the time that makes the most sense to do the application would be in fall of the year. You want to stop them outside before they get inside.
So what would you apply? A pesticide?
We do a pesticide on the exterior of the property or so, with the idea of, again, stopping them outside before they get inside. But with that being said, it's not something like you had that raccoon that you guys encountered before, so you can't just remove that raccoon and it be gone. So with box elder bugs, it's going to get rid of about 85% of them.
So what do you do if you want to keep them away, not just temporarily get rid of them for a little bit?
I think that's the bad news of this question is unfortunately, I don't think they're going anywhere. I was talking to some experts, and they're thinking that this is going to get worse and that we're going to start seeing even more and more of them on your houses. And I think sometimes it has to do with the location of the home. If you're in an area where there's a lot of farmer fields, things of that nature, you are more likely to see these types of bugs. And I don't think they're going anywhere, unfortunately.
Are they crawling in through holes in the house, or how are they getting in? Is it you open the door and they swarm in?
One of the ways that they enter a lot of times would be like a chimney stack or a bathroom exhaust or a window that isn't latched sometimes. I had one lady last year or so that had a basement window open that was by her furnace, and then from the furnace they went into every room of the house.
Are they harmful or just annoying?
I wouldn't say harmful. The stink bug gets its name from the smell if you squish it, so there's no harm to it in having them in your home. It's more of an annoying pest that you just don't want to see there.
So if you're going to the store in the fall, you want to be proactive. Is there something you can buy, or do you need a company to apply that?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've heard that you can take water and mix it with soap, and if you spray that, the bugs will lock up and die. I've not specifically tried that myself. The problem with that is how high can you get, and can you get to the areas that they're entering your home?
And there's no residual effect to it either. So it is effective, but you actually have to hit the bug. And once that bug comes back the next day, or a different bug comes back the next day, you still have bugs.
Okay, so what would you recommend for these folks?
I hate to push my services, but I would hire a professional, because I really don't think that you're going to get it under control or see the desired results of what you want unless you have somebody spray the outside of your house.
Okay, I hope we tackled all of the questions that those people asked us about stink bugs. Good luck to them. Annette, what is our next question?
Sure. Our next question comes from Lauren in Waterford. She says, we recently purchased a home. Just a few weeks after moving in, I've been woken up in the middle of the night by chewing noises underneath the shower in our bathroom. It usually occurs between 3 and 4 a.m. I haven't been sleeping at all because of it, and I find it extremely disturbing. Upon moving in, there have been signs of mice, like mouse droppings in the basement and basement crawl space. Apart from the chewing noises under the shower, we are discovering larvae that aren't coming up from the drain, but coming out from the shower walls and then collecting on the shower floor. I am 8 months pregnant and wish for this issue to be resolved before the baby is born. We don't want the problem to become greater than it already is. Lauren included a video of the chewing sound with her submission. So Lauren's question is, what is making a chewing noise under my shower?
This sounds like a real nightmare for her, something that's causing her a lot of stress, understandably. What do you suspect is happening here?
I would think that it would be mice that would be underneath there, especially having the other issues with mice in the basement area. How mice would get to that spot or so, as they like to follow the plumbing pipes or so, get underneath a bathroom or like a tub or a shower or something like that. And then there's insulation in there that they'll actually use as far as nesting material.
And are they active at like 3, 4 in the morning?
Most definitely. They're mostly nocturnal. So if you're in there trying to sleep at night and you're hearing that noise, you're going to be really, really concerned, obviously, and it'll be repeatedly almost every single night.
So what do you do if you have a mouse problem like this?
Well, the most important thing in stopping mice from getting into the house is having a seal done on the house. So what we do, if you call a company like one of ours, is we'll send a technician out there to take a look at the house and seal off where they're getting in. So that's the most important thing, is to stop them from coming in. I mean, certainly you can use rodenticides to poison the mice, but the most important thing is to stop them from coming into the home.
I picture the old-fashioned traps with the metal bar and the cheese. I mean, are there traps people could set in their house?
Yeah, absolutely. That is something you can do. You can go to a Fleet and Farm and grab some mouse traps, and that will at least let you know if you have a problem or not. A good spot to put them would be underneath the tub, or even in the basement on the sills. That seems to be a very popular spot to catch mice.
But if they sound like they're underneath the tub, does that make it sound like it's pretty significant?
I mean, significant. I mean, anytime anybody has a mouse in the house, that's a pretty significant thing. But I think it's probably just a pathway of where they're traveling, and kind of what Jeremy indicated, is they're looking for that insulation that's underneath there. There could be a little moisture there too that they're looking at. But yeah, that's it's probably just where they're living, and that's why she's hearing it in the same spot over and over again.
And what about this issue with the larvae she's describing? Any idea what that might be?
My thoughts on the larvae would be something along the lines of potential, maybe a mouse died, a fly got to the mouse, it laid its eggs on there, the eggs, turned into the larvae eating the mouse body, this is very gross to talk about, but
if that's what she's dealing with, I guess we have to.
I think that's kind of what's happening there. That would be my guess in terms of the larvae.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Lauren, that sounds difficult. I hope you can figure it out. Anything else we should tell Lauren about dealing with the mice?
I don't think so.
Okay, sounds good. What is our next question, Annette?
Yep, so 3 people wrote to us about problems with squirrels. Their submissions are short, so I'll read all of them. The first one comes from Deb in New Berlin, and she submitted this question. What's the best way to get rid of red squirrels getting into the garage and house between floorboards? And how can I permanently prevent them, or how can I permanently keep them out of our yard? The next submission comes from Jeff in Milwaukee, and he writes, squirrel problems, lots of them. One even came through my window and ate a birthday cake. And then Doreen in Milwaukee says, I have squirrels that get into my attic. I would like to know the solution to prevent them from coming in through holes they've made. They enter by the gutter and corners of my roof. How can I get them out of my attic? So in summary, what is the best way to get rid of squirrels?
Do you deal with squirrels a lot?
Yeah, we deal with squirrels a lot, especially like right around the springtime when they're getting ready to have their first litter or their babies for the first time this year. they're looking for that area of warmth and an area that they can protect their babies. But yeah, we see it's a constant call that we receive.
Do you have to catch them and remove them, or is there something else you could do?
We recommend catching them, removing them. The hardest thing about it a lot of times is locating where that hole would be. So I know that one question was in regards to red squirrels. Red squirrels need really small holes. So you're looking for holes like the size of a golf ball. So it can be difficult to find that hole. So it's important to talk to the person that's actually experiencing the problem so that they'll give you clues as to where they're coming and going from.
Okay, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that with red squirrels, they're kind of a little different than gray squirrels. Gray squirrels are usually going to enter high on people's homes, whereas red squirrels can actually enter at the base of the home. So that's one tricky thing, and she kind of alluded to that she heard them in between floors, where you won't necessarily hear gray squirrels in that situation. It's mostly a red squirrel scenario. But yeah, they are ones that we would trap and relocate. I think that's probably the best method. And then what we do after that is then we seal up the holes to make sure that nothing else can get into the home, and that is also a very important aspect of squirrel control.
If the squirrels get in once, are they likely to continue getting in over the years? Like, should you have follow-up appointments to make sure there aren't new holes?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say that you need to have follow-up appointments per se, but I do see that somebody that's had a squirrel issue in the past is very likely to have it happen again. And part of the reason is that could be that they have soffits that have some water damage. We patched it but didn't repair the entire area, so that can lead to softer wood, and then there's also a smell issue associated with that. So a lot of times people that have had squirrel issues end up having additional squirrel issues, unfortunately.
Okay, I bet they're really loud too.
Squirrels are not fun.
Okay. All right. What do we have next?
The next one comes from Debbie in Milwaukee. She says, my neighbor does not take care of his property and the house is infested with raccoons. I've put up rodent lights to keep them off my property. Is there another way I can get rid of them? So Debbie's question is, how can I get rid of raccoons?
So PJ and I actually met doing a story about 10 years ago where you were capturing raccoons. Is this another issue you have to capture and remove?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You hate to tell them to call the city and say, hey, there's an issue here with my neighbor. I don't like to get involved in those types of things, but that might be the best method is to kind of trap and relocate those guys as well. I've heard stories of cayenne pepper and putting that in the yard and bright lights, but really those things don't work. I know they also on the market have those noise sound, that's supposed to deter them, but I don't find that to be very successful either. So unfortunately, I think that relocation is probably the only way to get this situation resolved. It's a difficult one. I maybe have a nice conversation with the neighbor about cleaning up the property and just eliminating food sources, because that might be what's drawing them to the yard.
Because the problem's not going to go away unless the property is cleaned up. Is that fair to say?
Agreed. Yeah, and they also sell like products like repel products or so that you can buy from like a Fleet Farm, a Stein's. Those products might work for a short period of time, but as soon as it rains, it washes away. The biggest source of the issue is because of the next door neighbor. So like PJ indicated or so, getting in the middle of a situation like that, nobody really wants to be a part of that. But the recommendation would be to live track, remove, and relocate the raccoons and try to get everything cleaned up as best as possible.
Right. I guess in this case, you have to weigh what's more important to you, maintaining this relationship with your neighbor or taking care of the problem and talking to your municipality about cleaning up the property.
Agreed.
All right. Best of luck to you. What is our next question?
Yeah, so we received a handful of submissions that mention both ants and spiders. Here are a few examples. The first one comes from Sheila in Greenfield, and she says, I currently live in an apartment building. I'm seeing ants year-round and spiders every day of the summer. What can I do to get rid of them both? Robert in Menominee Falls reaches out to us with this issue. He says, we have a large anthill that comes back every year. We have a dog and don't know of a safe solution. Please help. And Frank in Racine would like to know, what is the most potent pesticide for spiders? How do I apply it and how often? In summary, how do I get rid of spiders and ants?
All right. Do you want to start with spiders or ants?
Let's go ants first.
Okay. What do you recommend?
I'll do the one with the gentleman who had the large ant mound. So what I've heard is you can take this you got to be careful with, but you can take boiling water and dump it down the hole, and that will get into everybody and kill them instantly. So that was probably the safest route for him specifically because of the ant scenario. Well, now the other thing to kind of keep in mind is once you've gotten rid of that colony, you have to take and rake out the ant hole because another colony could move into it. So you have to not only get rid of them, but then also rake it out and clean that area up so that the home is deterred for the ants.
If there weren't a dog involved or other pets, would there be another option?
Yeah, absolutely. We can take a pesticide and spray that area and get rid of the ants very quickly and effectively. And even with the dog, I feel like we can do that very easily. But if he's concerned about a pesticide, which some people are, and I totally understand that, the water method is probably the best route.
Okay, before we move on to spiders, Jeremy, any suggestions for ants getting in the house?
Ants getting in the house, it can be different if it's a sugar ant or if it's a carpenter ant situation. If it would be a carpenter ant situation, it's always a bigger issue in the aspect of there's got to be wood damage somewhere. So a lot of times they'll be rotting or decaying, whether it's a floorboard or a post outside or the siding or something like that. Sugar ants are a lot of times more seasonal and easier to control. A lot of times we'll do a perimeter treatment for them. Encourage people to, if they have small children like myself in my home, there's a tendency to be a lot of sticky things that would be on the floor all the time. And if you can clean those things up as best as possible and then do a perimeter treatment, it goes a long way.
Is that, again, something you could buy at the store?
There are products that you can buy at the store. PJ's company and my company were able to buy products that are a little bit stronger, that last a little bit longer. So because we are licensed and certified for that, which is different than just going to Fleet Farm or to Stein's or something along those lines.
All right. Anything?
Yeah, taro would be a good product that they could get, and that would be one that you could get in the store. The nice thing about taro is once they eat it, they get it on their bodies, and then they transfer it to everybody else in the colony. So taro works, but not as well as what we would use, but it's definitely a product that you could get at home and use.
Okay. And what about spiders? People have an aversion to spiders. I don't know if they're necessarily bad to have around, but what are your thoughts on spiders?
100%. And spiders are tricky, like a lot of the things that we deal with, because every home is going to be a little bit different with spiders. Do you live proximity to water? Do you live in the woods? Do you live in an area that's really dry? If you live by water or in the woods, you're always going to have spiders. It's just a matter of how do you keep them under control. And that's when it's a service like ours or so that we go out and we treat every 3 months or every 90 days or so to help keep those spiders at bay.
All right. Anything you want to add, PJ?
Yeah, lake homes have become very difficult when it comes to spiders. One thing you always want to consider is, the lights on the outside of the house. Do I have a lot of lights and letting, illuminating the yard, and that will, again, attract in insects? Well, if I'm a spider and I want to eat insects, I'm going to build my webs right by those lights. So that would be one thing you kind of consider is, do I have a lot of lights? And then a good way to control spiders that a customer could do is just knocking down the webs constantly. If you're constantly knocking down the webs, they have to rebuild and exert a lot of energy, and then they really need to get a meal quickly. So if you're out there knocking down the webs on a regular basis, you can actually effectively control spiders to a point, although there, like Jeremy indicated, there are some homes that just based off of where the house is located, you're always going to have spider issues.
Okay, I'll remember that one for myself. Annette, who is our next question from?
So we received 4 submissions about birds. The first one comes from Nana in Milwaukee. She would like to know, how do I keep birds from building a nest in my downspout? Nikki in Brookfield writes to us with this question: how do I prevent birds from nesting in my house lights? Sue in Milwaukee would like to know, how do you keep birds off your front porch railing? And Scott in Watertown would like to know, how do you remove pigeons from a barn and keep them out? In summary, how do I keep birds from nesting on my property?
Okay, I think that is a pretty direct question. What do you recommend?
With birds, it can be tricky because where are they nesting? So I think when Annette referred to the bird nest in the downspout, it's probably on the elbow of the downspout, not in the downspout, because in the downspout, the water would naturally wash it away. But they do sell, or we install bird spikes, which seem to help to keep them from nesting on it or so. But another remedy that I've seen in a lot of homes that I actually use at my own home from time to time is we have outdoor speakers and we get birds that nest on them. Well, for a 1 month period or so, I might take an old can or an old milk jug or something like that and just place it on top of it, get through nesting season, and the birds will go away.
What's a bird spike?
So they're strips that you would purchase, and they're little plastic or metal strips, and then they go up and they go at different angles or so, and basically it's a deterrent to stop them from having that nice cozy area to build that nest in.
Are these pretty common places to hear birds nesting? House lights, downspouts?
Yeah, I would say so. Birds are, going to look for opportunities where they can nest and also stay dry. So if there's an opportunity for them to get in, then they're going to use that. Anytime you have a nest, you have to figure out, all right, how can I effectively close off this area to prevent it? They also make something called an optical gel disc, and you can put those in those areas where they're nesting as well. And those also have a visual deterrent to the birds, so they don't like the visual that it gives off, and it also has an odor and a smell. So that's something that we would put out to kind of prevent birds from nesting in those areas. As far as the pigeons go in the barn, really, barns are hard to bird proof, and I would say trapping and relocating those pigeons are probably the only way to do a birds and a pigeons in a barn. Unfortunately, there's just usually too many opportunities and areas for birds to get in.
And I know Sue had asked about birds on her railing. Some people like birds on the railing. Other people don't like them. Maybe they're making a mess on Sue's porch. Any recommendations for keeping them off the railing?
I would probably go with those optical gel discs at that point, and you can put those out. They look like little, they're just little circular discs. Those are things that we can get online, and I'm sure they could probably find them as well. And then you place those in the areas where the birds are nesting. Otherwise, netting works effectively, but do you really want to have a big net on your porch? Probably not.
Probably not. Okay, our next question is this about termites?
It is. So this question comes from ST in Milwaukee. And the question is, how do you know if you have termites, and who do you call if you suspect that you do?
Okay. How do you tell? Are there sounds? Are there signs that we could look out for?
I'll refer to you as far as I think you deal with a little bit more on the termite spectrum.
Yeah, termites, I would say you're the only way you're going to be able to tell termite damage is if you see like wood, wood pulp, things of that nature. Termites have a tendency to just pound through wood at a alarming rate. I would say, I've been in the pest control industry. My dad started this company about 30 some years ago, and I've only run into termites probably 20 times. It's not something that we run into a lot in Wisconsin. The soil's not conducive for it. Checking the home, if you've had termites though in your house, the likelihood of having it again is very high. So I don't know if there's a visual you could do per se, but you will notice, you'll be able to tell if there's damage in the woods just based off of the lines, and they'll make little holes, and they'll kind of be like a jagged or a zigzag pattern in the wood. So the wood pulp is also something that you can see. So those are something that usually most people don't have to worry about. But I will say, if you've had termites in your home before, that there is a chance that you could have them again.
So if you discover you are one of those rare people that has termites, how do you get rid of them?
Yeah, termites, absolutely 100%. You need to go to a professional in that regards. I would not recommend trying to do that at by yourself. It's just, that's a situation where you can have severe damage to the home. So you're going to want to hire a pest professional for something like that.
All right. Thank you for that question. What is our next question?
Yep, so we got a couple of questions that mention coyotes. I'll read one of them. It's from Marissa in Sussex. She would like to know, is there anything I can do to keep my kids and dogs safe from coyotes? We have several wandering around our neighborhood. So the question is, how do I keep kids and pets safe from coyotes?
I'll admit I have a vested interest in this question because I heard coyotes a couple nights ago in the middle of the night. It sounded like they were having a brawl. It sounded really scary. I wouldn't want to be outside when that's happening. What can we do?
And it is really scary because they call and they echo back and forth, and even if there's only one or two of them, it sounds like there's an entire pack of them.
Right.
But the easiest, most effective solution as far as protecting your pets or small children from coyotes would be considering having a fenced-in yard, something to try to keep the coyotes out as much as possible. To know when coyotes would be lurking, so like dusk, daybreak, and stuff like that, when they're actively trying to feed or so, are another areas or time frames that I would try to avoid.
Right.
The problem with coyotes is it's not something we can catch and relocate. And the coyotes also kind of population control themselves. So if you have 10 coyotes living in your neighborhood, and let's say I come in and get 8 of them, and you have 2 that you've left out there, well, then they'll likely have a very large litter of babies, and voila, you're back to that same 10 really quickly. So the best prevention is keeping your especially small dogs. I've not heard of many attacks on children, and I kind of watch those things very closely. Certainly we've run into small dogs. Now usually what happens with small dogs, it ends up being a situation where people take the dog out, they put the dog on a leash, and they're kind of stuck there, and that they will come and grab them at times, and that's an unfortunate thing, and I've certainly heard of that and run into that. So it's basically just making sure that you're operating a little bit more smart when it comes to coyotes themselves. And anytime that you're out there, if you make loud noises, they're likely to, they'll be scared of you especially, but you just have to kind of watch and be careful and not just leash the dog, especially a small dog, because that would make me a little bit nervous.
What would you tell, kids or neighbors if they come across a coyote? Do you back away? Do you run? What do you do?
I would say loud noises and make yourself big would probably be the most effective thing. I can't imagine a coyote that would come at you if you are, being just, and you don't have to run at them, just an aggressive noise and being as loud as possible will scare them away.
Okay. Thank you. I will remember that for myself. What do we have?
This one comes from Marcia in Greenfield. She says, how do I keep feral cats that my neighbor feeds from using my yard as a litter box? They are TNR cats, but it's becoming a nuisance and they're killing my landscape. I've tried essential oils, citrus, and vinegar. I can't put up sprinklers because of delivery people. I've bought scat pads that are prickly, but they're expensive. Any suggestions? So the question here is, how do I get rid of feral cats that my neighbor feeds?
This reminds me of the raccoon problem with a neighbor enabling an animal.
Agreed.
What do we do?
I think it comes down to what kind of relationship you have with your neighbor. And the first approach and the best approach would be to politely go over and tell them all the damage that these feral cats are creating in your yard and that you don't appreciate it. And if you can come to an understanding of not feeding them as frequently or to manage how many are actually there. It sounds like this is a situation that it's not 1 or 2 cats. It sounds like there's 6, 8, 10 cats that are around. But as far as deterrent, anything that you would spray out there, again, the rain's going to wash away, or over time, it's just not going to last.
What is a TNR? Is that something to do with being neutered or not, or what is that?
Yeah, I believe that's the situation. Yeah.
So it sounds like she's tried a lot of things. Has she kind of exhausted her options aside from speaking with the neighbors?
Yeah, I feel bad for her in this situation because I will tell you, feral cats have a really bad odor, and urine and droppings from them in your yard is a nightmare to deal with. It is a very, very smelly, and yes, she's 100% right. What she said, they will kill plants and other things from the urine and fecal matter. So I feel bad, but there's really not a lot you can do unless you have that conversation with her. Unfortunately, there's really not a product out there that's going to keep them from coming into your yard, unfortunately.
Would she be able to scare them away, or like a big dog? Or I'm not saying go get a dog, but if you're out there a lot, are they less likely to come?
Possibly. The issue when they start using a given area as a litter box, they'll come back to it repeatedly. And to be able to break them of that cycle is really, really difficult.
Okay. Good luck with that, Marcia. What is our next question from Kathy?
Kathy's from Milwaukee. She says, these tiny flying bugs have been inside my house for over a year. They're not limited to one room, but I notice more in one single bathroom and adjacent rooms. I've bleached the sink drains to no avail. Any help would be greatly appreciated. They are extremely annoying. So the question, how do I get rid of tiny flying bugs?
What do we think these are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would guess probably moisture related. It could be a small gnat or a fly. One question would be, is this a newer construction home or not? Because that would make a difference in regards to sometimes in newer construction homes you can get these flies that will get into the sill and inside the home into the walls, and then they just keep reproducing there. So from what it sounds like it could be moisture related in terms of this insect. So eliminating the moisture might be a way to control it. It could also be coming from an external source as maybe outside. So I would want to check outside to see if there is an issue there. Actually, bleaching the drains is not a bad idea, and that is one way, but that's only if it's a drain fly. And based off of what she's saying, I'm guessing this is more of a different type of fly. Unfortunately, it's hard to give a perfect solution without knowing the exact insect. But my guess is that this insect is probably living in the walls, and maybe a treatment to the entire bathroom so when they land on the treatment itself, they die, would probably be the best solution.
What do you think, Jeremy?
I would agree with PJ in the aspect of without actually seeing what's going on, little flies or little bugs that are in somebody's house could be a wide variety of things. They could be fruit flies, they could be drain flies, they could be sewer flies. It's hard to get a handle on exactly what's going on, but almost always it has something to do with moisture. So moisture, water can do a lot of damage to our homes, and not just in the aspect of it destroying wood, but once it's destroying wood, it's also allowing bugs and insects to thrive.
I feel like I've seen a lot of do-it-yourself tips for fruit flies, right? Like the oil or what do any of those work?
Yeah, I would say that fruit flies and those absolutely will work. You can use apple cider and vinegar, and you place little holes in the plastic, and then they fly in there and they're attracted to it. And usually mix that with some dish soap. So I would absolutely say those things you will find some success. But again, eliminating the source, especially if it's a fruit fly, usually there's a reason it's called a fruit fly. There's some type of fruit that is, or some type of food that's been left and exposed, and maybe you bought something that was not the ripest, or it's gotten ripe and now it's or older. So I would kind of check those areas to see what is specifically causing the issue itself.
All right, Annette, what next?
So we received a few questions that mentioned small rodents, including small mice. The first question comes from Julie in West Allis. Her question is, how do you remove a rodent that is living between the siding and foundation of your home, and how do you keep it from coming back? Jeremy in West Allis also has an issue with small rodents, and he asks, how do you get rid of chipmunks that have tunneled underground? So in summary, how do you get rid of rodents?
I assume these kind of questions keep you very busy in Wisconsin.
Correct. And there's tons of different rodents, and chipmunks can be really destructive in the aspect of if somebody goes out and has a brand new patio or so, and there's little pavers that would be there, so, and then all of a sudden you have chipmunks that burrow underneath there. What are you supposed to do? The easiest solution or so, and what I would recommend doing, would be to live trap and relocate these chipmunks or so, because you don't want to be out there using like a poison, because, well, it's just inhumane as far as when it comes to chipmunks to go ahead and use that approach or so. So I would recommend live trapping and removing them. And in regards to the mice in the siding, the old-fashioned snap traps that you referenced before work really, really well. But the biggest thing is, after you eliminate that rodent, is to seal up the area where they're getting into. And that can be tricky to find, especially if it's underneath a siding point, or if the siding is relatively old or in not very good shape.
Do you have to worry about smell from these animals, like dying in your walls and things like that? Is there a way to avoid that?
Yeah, that's absolutely certainly a situation that you want to avoid is trapping something and keeping it dead in the wall. So what I would do is kind of what he alluded to is trapping them first, getting them caught, getting them out of there. Then maybe if you've located the hole, put some newspaper or something in there to see if anything else is coming and going. Once you've identified that nothing else is coming and going out of the hole, then you can go ahead and you can seal it. But if I was a do-it-myselfer, I would go around my house with a mirror and a flashlight and kind of look along the foundation to see if there's any gaps in there, and that's what I'd be looking for to try to seal off.
And the newspaper is just a test, because they'll eat through the newspaper.
Yeah,
and
just
you'll
to
know.
see if it's gone the next day, something else is coming and going. So it's
just so that you don't lock something inside the house, so they can push it out, and you can tell if they're still coming and going from there.
Got it. All right, that's great advice. All right, what is? Oh, I like Tracy's. Oh no, is it Mark next?
It's Mark. Mark is from Milwaukee. This is his question. Is there any way to deal with the increasing turkey population, such as nuisance, animal hunting permits, DNR resources, or city animal control? Also, is there a source for damage remediation from the city for garden or yard damage from turkeys?
I know some neighborhoods in Milwaukee are famous for having turkeys around. What if someone doesn't like them?
Yeah, this is a tough one too. So we have in the past taken fishing a line and taken mylar and wrapped that in the yard, and the mylar material kind of moves in the wind, and they don't like it visually. They also don't like the sound of it. So that we've tried that. Really keeping wild turkeys though out of your yard is a very, very difficult task. I would say that is one that you're not going to have a lot of success with, and you're really not going to be able to call the city in any regards to that. If they like the area, you just really have to try to deter them. I know that Canadian geese, for example, do not like the visual of lights. So if you have like a laser pointer or something along those lines, I would guess that probably would work on turkeys as well, just kind of putting it towards their eyesight. So that would be one way that I would try to deter them. But other than that, turkeys are difficult to get rid of.
What about, have you ever used like plastic coyotes or stuff like that you'd put out in people's yards, and how successful would that be? I know the other thing as far as keeping turkeys out of people's yards is people love to feed the birds a lot of times, and people don't understand sometimes that when they have all that feed that's out there, they're bringing in other wildlife, whether it would be mice or turkeys or deer or different things like that. So sometimes it could be as simple as just stop feeding the birds for a couple of months or so and just break the turkeys of their habit, because if there's always food in a given spot, they'll always come back.
This person mentioned animal hunting permits. I'm assuming most communities aren't going to allow that.
Yeah, no dice on that.
Okay, good to know. All right, what do we have next, Annette?
Now we have Tracy's question.
All right.
Tracy's from Elkhorn. What is the best way to get rid of a woodchuck or groundhog?
I'm curious what kind of damage they could cause or what kind of pests they would be.
A lot of times you would think you just see this fluffy woodchuck or groundhog that's out there moving slowly or relatively slowly, and think that they don't create much damage. But it's an animal that's probably 6-8 inches in circumference or so, and they're digging holes. They're digging big holes, which again, what I touched on before, small rodents going underneath pavers, they can do the same thing. They go underneath people's sheds, they can cause them to collapse. They can create holes next to somebody's foundation, and the water doesn't drain away the way that it's supposed to or so, and then you could have water seepage into your basement as well.
Do you see this very often?
Oh yeah, we catch a lot of woodchucks, and I wouldn't say that the damage it occurs a ton in terms of collapsing the shed, but when it does happen, I mean, you're talking about a lot of money to replace it. So I have seen it happen. It's not something that happens very often, but what Jeremy alluded to is correct. I mean, that is a big issue, and you want to get them out of there and not underneath the shed for sure.
And the main red flag, if you have a woodchuck or groundhog, is the hole in the ground.
Yeah,
and
correct.
It's a big hole.
And they're active during the daytime, so people generally, if they're home during the daytime, they'll see the groundhog or the woodchuck from time to time. Whereas if you had a raccoon, they're going to be nocturnal, and you might have a raccoon issue and not really be aware of it.
Got it. All right. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. So we've gotten a couple questions that mention animals damaging people's yards, such as rabbits. Here's one of them. It's from Nikki in Brookfield. How do I keep deer, coyote, raccoons, etc. out of my yard? They treat our yard like a bathroom to the point where we can't use our backyard. They also destroy my perennials and annuals. The question, how do I keep deer, coyotes, and raccoons out of my yard?
So we've talked a little bit about some options, but what would you recommend?
Well, deer, there's a spray that you can use, and I find that to be more successful than I would in terms of a rabbit or coyote. But if you're looking specifically at them attacking vegetation, you can spray the whatever you're looking to keep, and that does avoid them. We also use a product called Deer No-No, which looks like ivory soap, and that has a very strong smell. They don't like that, and they kind of stay clear of the area. So those are products that we use. I would say deer is something that you can keep out of the yard in terms of feeding. In terms of droppings, that might be a little bit more difficult, especially based off of how big the yard is. In terms of rabbits and rabbits are also one that reproduces so frequently that becomes very difficult to keep them out of the yard as well. People try mothballs and things of that nature, but I don't see much success with any of that. And like Jeremy indicated before, any type of repel that you use, once it rains or it rains heavily, it's gonna mitigate that, and it's not gonna be as effective.
Have you seen any homes that have been really damaged? Flowers and gardens just decimated by animals?
Yeah, we've seen rabbits a lot of times come in when the shoots are relatively young or so on those little plants or so. They'll come and just chew them right down to the ground or so. Again, that's a situation with rabbits, not so much with deer, but you could live trap them, remove them, and relocate them as well. That's something that we've done for people in the past. And we've seen a lot of rabbit damage in wintertime. If we have a season that has a lot of snow, they'll start chewing on all the shrubs and can actually chew the shrubs to the point that they'll actually kill the shrubs.
All right. And what is our next question?
So this is our last one. It comes from Nancy in New Berlin. How do I stop beetles from eating my roses in the summer months?
I feel like a lot of people just hate when pests get into their gardens and they work hard at them. I bought some tulips once and they got eaten within a week. What do you do in this situation?
Yeah, she's referring to Japanese beetles, and they are a very, very hardy insect. I don't know if you've ever tried to deal with those, and even just to squish them. They are a very, very difficult insect to control with even a pesticide. What we do is we do a granular treatment in the yard, and we do that at the time when they go in, because what happens is they'll go and they'll lay their eggs in the yard, and basically right in the same area of where your roses and those flowers that they're eating are, and the granular treatment will attack those and not let them hatch. And then we also follow up by doing a secondary treatment to the roses themselves, and what happens is it's once the insect lands on the rose, it picks up the chemical, and then it will die. And even even ingesting the rose itself, it will die. But they're very, very hardy. They become very difficult to control. There's something called bag-a-bug, which you can buy in a store, and those I see in people's yards. The one problem with that is it's a pheromone. So not only are you going to draw in the insects that are in your yard, you're probably drawing in all of your neighbors' insects. And if you've ever seen those things, those can fill up quite fast. So yeah, they become a problem. It's also an issue because you're now drawing in a bunch of Japanese beetles as well.
I've heard them called Asian beetles. Is that the same thing, or is that something different?
That's something altogether different.
Okay. So Japanese beetle is not the same as the ones that look like a off-color ladybug?
Correct.
Okay.
The Japanese beetles are going to be more like neon in color.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've seen those too.
Yeah, they're more like a metallic, and then the other ones are orange.
Okay. I'm surprised we didn't get a lot of questions about Asian beetles because those are an invasive species, right?
Yes, they are.
And they can just flock in.
Yeah, they're most of those are going to be situations too where, especially if you say have a lot of Asian beetles, you're going to have a farmer's field nearby where they're feeding in the field, and then all of a sudden the farmer comes out, he cuts the field down. Now these guys have no food source, and now they're looking for areas to basically hibernate, and so they become an issue as well in terms of hibernating, and fall is the biggest problem for those guys.
Yeah, I've seen them covering the side of people's houses before, just a wall of those beetles. Are some years worse than others for bugs?
Some years are worse than others, especially when we're referencing like seasonal pests, which would be Asian beetles, box elder bugs, stink bugs. It depends on what the weather's going to do. So if we have an early frost and a really hard frost, a lot of those bugs are going to just naturally die at that point in time. If we have a fall that lingers a little bit longer and we have that 60, 70 degree day, they're going to be everywhere, especially on the south side of the house, and then later in the day on the west side of the house. They love to follow the sun, and then at that point in time, they're trying to penetrate behind the siding or down the chimney or those bathroom exhausts and winter in your house.
Do you have any predictions for this spring, given the winter we've had, when it comes to it being a bad year for bugs, being a better year?
I would say, based off of the really mild winter that we've had, that this will be a bad year for bugs and animals. I have a feeling that there will be a lot of animals that are having babies earlier than usual, and I have a feeling that this is probably going to be a bad year for both bugs and animals.
Okay, we have been warned. Thank you so much. Annette, that was all our questions, right? Okay, so that is all the time we have for today. If you would like to submit a question for a future Ask Contact 6 segment, you can go to fox6now.com and click on the blue Ask Contact 6 button. Jeremy and PJ, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
It was awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this was fun. I learned a lot. Thanks also to the people who make this recording possible, including our executive producer, Sarah Smith, Craig Sween in graphics, and chief photojournalist, Cale Zimney, who is also working our video switcher today. I'm Jenna Sachs. Thanks for joining us.